This is the final report on Reed Pullen's case number 583. I assume most of you have already seen the preliminary report. These are Reed's preoperative images of the case. Large areas around both the mesial and distal root with the buccal plate has been eroded away, and his clinical pictures show the root has a vertical fracture. There were really no symptoms other than palpation sensitivity and a fluctuant swelling. You can see upon access, all three canals were non-vital, and these are his specifics for the sweeps. Irrigation technique that he used. He used Triton as the irrigant and the Fotona laser as a treatment. I'm going to go through these very fast because they were all in the initial preliminary report. I sectioned the root and then split the root sagittally and also did some imaging on the fractures. So those are the sagittal splits. And then when you actually look at the case, there was quite a bit of blood clotting in the canals. Hard to tell whether it was actually pulp or just simply a blood clot. And in the preliminary report, we did a lot of imaging on the mesial half of the root, which I won't review too much here, but you get a sense for the canal wall looked like it had been very well instrumented, and the clot looked like it had possibly some suspected bacteria impregnation actually in the clots. Hard to tell. Mostly just red and white blood cells. But you see these structures, and they certainly look like bacteria. And then in areas where there was no blood clot, you go in and look at the canal wall in many areas in the mesial root. Quite a bit of white and red blood cells, and what looks like just a decalcified dentinal area in most places, with a suggestion of some organisms on the surface, but actually fairly clean and uniformly decalcified. However, when we did look at the apices on the mesial root. This is the right half. You get a little bit different picture. So at the terminus, there was considerable biofilm present, as you saw in the preliminary report. Many white and red blood cells, as well as pseudohyphae, and possibly even some fungi present. So the mesial root was very, very contaminated, at least at the terminus. But the distal root is a little bit different, and I'll spend most of my time on the distal root. When you look at it, there were blood clots all throughout the distal root. And we're going to look at 5 different areas at the terminus, because Reed said the distal canal was necrotic when he went into it. So we were suspecting to find quite a bit of bacterial contamination. This is area 1, and when you actually go in and look at it at the terminus, I could not find any evidence of any bacterial impregnation. You have actually not even a smear layer, but a decalcified area of dentin. So I'm becoming more impressed with the Triton. If you look at area 2 here, you see evidence of coagulated blood, and maybe there's some areas where you can see something that might be suggestive of microorganisms, but mostly just coagulated blood and white blood cells. So it was very surprising you have a lot of red blood cells in this fibrin network. And now we're going to look at area 3, which is kind of the beginning of where the lateral canal was and where you would be very suspicious of a lot of microorganisms. And yet, when you go into that area, all you really see is red, white blood cells in a fibrin network. And maybe there's some suggestions of some microorganisms, but very, very few. Nothing at all like the mesial root. And if you actually look at there were a couple of lateral canals, when you actually go into those areas, again, you have a hard time really finding any microorganisms at all. So either the sweeps and the irrigant removed those microorganisms or altered them in such a way that they are not recognizable. Initially, I thought maybe the distal root was vital because we couldn't really find much in the way of microorganisms. But if it was necrotic, here you see, well, maybe there's some microorganisms there, but it's very hard to tell. If you look at area number 5, which we're actually able to go right into that accessory canal, again, looks like there's quite a bit of actual pulp there and many, many white blood cells. So there must have been bacteria at one time, or at least bacterial toxins acting as an attractant for all of those white blood cells. But again, no real bacterial contamination. So I hope this was interesting to you, and I'm interested in any comments.